Hello children. Today we are going to see the next topic, human eye and the colorful world. Have you ever wondered how we see the objects around us? Yes, with the help of our sensitive organ, human eye. Let us see how does this eye help us to see the objects around us. Yes, in the previous lessons you might have studied about the reflection and the diffraction phenomenon of light. In that, reflection of light on an object causes or helps us to see that object. The same thing happens in our eyes also. Here, refraction also takes place. That is, the light which is incident on an object gets reflected, and those reflected rays will get into our eyes, and these rays will get refracted in the lens present in our eyes, and thus we are able to see the images. The images are formed on a screen in our eyes called as the retina. So it is just like a process happening in a camera. So the camera has a lens and a screen. Similarly, a human eyes also has a lens and a screen. The lens is the convex lens present inside the human eyes, and the screen is the retina. Next, the simple procedure. Let us discuss about the simple technique how the images are formed in the eyes. So first and foremost, the reflected light from the object enters into our eyes, and that gets refracted. Those rays gets refracted from the cornea, and then they pass into the eye lens, and the images are formed in the screen called as the retina. And in the retina, we have some light sensitive cells which detect these light signals, and they send it to the brain through the optical nerves as electrical signals, and the brain interprets these signals, and thus we are able to see these objects. So here the key words are the cornea, eye lens and the retina, and the light sensitive cells will convert these light signals as electrical signals to the brain, and the brain interprets these signals as again the light signals, and then it will send us a message that we are seeing an object. Thus we are able to see the object. So for all these process, we should have a proper organ, and that organ is called as the human eye. And what is the shape of this eye? It is a well-known shape, that is, it is in a spherical shape, and the diameter of the eyeball is 2.3 centimeter. And when I talk about this convex lens and the image formed in the convex lens, now immediately you should have a question. What kind of images will be formed? Because convex lens will produce both virtual images and real images. So what kind of images will be formed on the retina? So here, since we have a convex lens, obviously most of the times the convex lens produces real and inverted image. The same thing happens here also. The convex lens produces real images and inverted images on the retina. The brain is the one which interprets these real and inverted signals as virtual and erect images. Now we get into the parts of a human eye. See, this lesson talks about the light and its concepts. So we are not going to discuss in detail about the anatomy of eye. We just look at the parts of the human eye which are dealing with the process of vision. So here there is no need to discuss about the detailed biological parts or the anatomy of the human eye. So we are going to see the parts which help us to detect the light and which helps us to detect the images formed. And how are the images formed? How is the light entering into the eyes help us to see the objects? So these are the discussions we are going to talk in this lesson. So the parts which are related to these processes will be discussed here. So here Basically, the light enters the eyes. So, it is through the cornea. Cornea is the first and foremost layer. It is a bulged outwards transparent layer through which the light enters. And then there is iris. Iris gives us the color. And then you have pupil, then we have lens, then we have ciliary muscles, and so on. So let us see one by one. So the first and foremost part is the cornea. So it is the outermost layer, it is bulged, somewhat it is bulged outwards, and it is transparent, so the light easily enters through it. And most of the light entering through the cornea are refracted in the outer surface of the cornea itself. And this cornea protects the human eye from the small dust particles entering into the internal part of our eyes. Next comes the iris. Here you can see the picture and you will identify, or you will be able to tell the color of the eye. So the color of the eye is given by this dark muscular structure called as the iris. That is one function of this iris, that is, it gives us the color of the eye. And this iris acts as a diaphragm for the pupil. That is, the iris can contract and relax. So it is just a muscular structure which can contract and relax, so that it can control, or it helps the pupil to control the amount of light. Okay, so the iris is a small muscular diaphragm and it gives the color to the human eye. Next one is the pupil. The small opening or the very dark black color thing which you see in the eyes is called as the pupil, and that is in between the, or it is the small opening in the iris. So the pupil is the one which allows the light to enter into the eyes. So all the light entering into the eyes is through this pupil. So the pupil allows the necessary amount of light which helps us to see the object, and the size of the pupil is adjusted by the iris. So the size of the pupil is adjusted by the iris, which acts as a diaphragm, and the light enters into this pupil. So we conclude that the pupil regulates the amount of light entering into the eyes. The next important part of the human eye which helps us to detect an object is the crystalline lens. As I told you earlier, it is a convex lens, and the images formed through this lens is the real and inverted images, and they are formed on the screen called as the retina. Next, there is a small fluid-like substance between the lens and the cornea, and that is called as the aqueous humor. So it helps in changing the shape of the lens. So when the lens adjusts itself, the focal length is also adjusted. So the aqueous humor helps the lens to change its shape. Next comes the screen of the eye, the most important part of eye, that is the retina. So it is again a delicate membrane on the back of the eye. The images are formed on this retina, and this retina is made up of numerous number of rod cells and cone cells. These are called as light sensitive cells, and through these cells the light is sensed and they are detected and they are converted into electrical signals. Next, these optic nerve cells, that is the light sensitive cells, are of two types, as I told you earlier, cone cells and rod cells. The cone cells are sensitive to bright light so that they can sense the color of the object. The cone cells are used to detect the color of the object, and the rod cells help us to detect the objects even in dim light. And now you may ask, a few questions like some people are suffering from color blindness. What would be the cause for this? Could you guess? Yes, correct. They may not have sufficient corn cells, so they may be struggling to detect the color of the object properly. And you may also have another question that some creatures are able to see even in the dark, like owl and some nocturnal animals. They're able to see very clearly during night or during dark. How is this possible? So that is because they have enough of rod cells, and they may have numerous infinite number of rod cells, so they can even detect an object with a very small amount of light, which is not possible by a human being. We have a limited number of rod cells, so we need at least a sufficient amount of light to see the object, which is sometimes more sufficient for some other creatures like nocturnal animals. So the nocturnal animals would have more number of rod cells, which helps them to see an object even in very dark, that is pitch dark. Next comes the ciliary muscles, the most important part which helps the convex lens to adjust its focal length. As I told you earlier, iris is the muscular diaphragm which helps the adjustment of the size of the pupil. Similarly, the ciliary muscles help in changing the shape of the lens. They also help the lens to adjust the focal length, because the lens is held by the ciliary muscles. The lens is held by the ciliary muscles. Next comes the vitreous humor. See, there is a space between the lens and the retina, and the blue color shaded. This space is filled with a jelly-like substance called as the vitreous humor, which almost helps the light to properly focus on the retina. It adjusts itself, or it helps to observe unwanted refraction. Next one. So next we'll see how the iris helps the pupil to allow the necessary amount of light. So the iris relaxes in bright light. You can look at the first picture, the left side picture. You can see the iris as big one, right? There is a small opening in the pupil. That is, the pupil has a very small opening, right? And this is called the relaxed position of iris, which helps the pupil to regulate the amount of light entering during the bright light. That is, when you are in a sunny place, or when you are in a very big sunshine, or when you are in a very big open space where there is a huge amount of light, bright light. So in that place, you need only a small amount of light to enter into the pupil. So the pupil becomes very small and the iris becomes relaxed. So there will be only a small amount of light entering into the pupil. And the next right side picture shows you how the iris contracts when you are in a dim light space. That is, when you suddenly enter into a dark room. What happens? Your pupil should open widely, so that you have to gather all the sufficient amount of light present in that dark room. So the pupil has to open widely. So the iris contracts and the pupil becomes wider, so that it allows some amount of light entering into the eyes. So it allows more amount of light to enter into the eyes. So this is how the iris acts as a diaphragm. So in bright light, the iris relaxes and makes the pupil to become short. And in dim light, it contracts and the pupil becomes wide. Next, what is the power of accommodation of eye? Like iris controlling the pupil, the ciliary muscles helps the lens to adjust its focal length. So the ability of the eye lens to change its focal length, it is called as the power of accommodation. And this is done with the help of ciliary muscles. See, look at the pictures. So when you see an object which is at infinity, the eye lens is thin. Eye lens becomes thin. That is, the ciliary muscles becomes relaxed. So it has larger focal length and a small converging power. So when the focal length is big, the power is small. So here the same phenomenon takes place. That is, when you look at an object at infinity, the lens becomes thin. It is because of the relaxation of the ciliary muscles. And the lens is thin and it has a larger focal length. It means that it has a small converging power. Next, when you look at an object very close or very nearby, the ciliary muscles will contract and make the lens to become thick. So if the lens becomes thick, the focal length becomes small. So your converging power becomes more. So this is how the lens adjusts itself according to the distance of the objects, and the focal length changes, and this is called as the power of accommodation. Next, what is the range of accommodation reached by the normal eye? That is, how far can you see an object, or how far, if the object is placed, can you look at it or can you see that object? It is infinity. That is, you are able to see the sun, which is at an infinitely far away. It is infinitely far away, but still you are able to see the sun, and you are able to see the light of a star, because the range of human eye varies from 25 centimeter to infinity. So that is the range of accommodation of normal human eye, between infinity and 25 centimeter. What is called near point and far point of eye? That is, first one, tell you what is a far point. The farthest point where an eye can see the object is called as the far point of eye. That is, you are able to see the sun, which is too far away, which is at infinite distance. So that is called as the far point of the eye. And also, you are able to see an object which is very close to your eyes at a distance of 25 centimeter. So that is called as the near point. So the nearest point where eye can see is called as the near point of eye. So that is 25 centimeters from the eye. Next is, why do we have two eyes? Have you ever thought of it? See, even if you have two eyes, you can look at only one object at a time, or can you look the same object twice, or can you look the same object 4 times at a time? No, you are able to see one object only once at a time. An object is seen only once at a time. So both eyes are able to see only one object. That is, if you have a cup in front of you, you can see only one cup. Since you have two eyes, you cannot see 2 cups at a time, right? So that is how. And why do we have 2 eyes? We are able to see only one object. Then why should we have 2 eyes? It is because to get a wider view. So one eye, with the help of one eye, you can see only 150 degrees horizontal field. With the help of 2 eyes, you can also see the remaining 30 degrees. That is, from left to right, you can also see the remaining 30 degrees, since the 2 eyes are separated with a small distance. So the eye could combine 2 images and make you see only one image of the object at a time. So in order to help you to see with a wider view, God has created 2 eyes for human beings. So this is all for today.